this section, we're going to look more specifically at the health impacts due to air pollution. So you can have a chronic problem. These are things like asthma or lead poisoning, which results in a gradual deterioration of your physiological functions over a period of time. You can have an acute impact where it is life-threatening very, very quickly. An example we'll see in a minute is Bhopal, India. You can also have a carcinogenic reaction, in which case you end up with cancer. In this case, it's probably lung cancer because it's air pollution. So, not a big surprise that air pollutants enter via your respiratory system. You breathe them in. If you breathe in a particulate, you can impede your breathing. Some are carcinogenic as well. If you breathe in carbon monoxide, it's poisonous and it blocks the O2 delivery to tissues, which is why carbon monoxide poisoning is so dangerous. Lead is toxic at low concentrations. It also bioaccumulates. It means it builds up over time, which can lead to brain damage and death. We've talked a little bit about the PANs and the fact that they're damaging to animals and plants. They can irritate your mucous membranes. Sulfur dioxide inflames your bronchi, which otherwise is known as bronchitis. Ozone is actually toxic to animals and plants, and it inflames and causes lung fibrosis, making your lungs less able to breathe and take in oxygen. If you look at lead poisoning and chronic effects, a good example is Bangkok, Thailand. Remember, hopefully, that lead was added to gasoline to alter octane and reduce emissions. In 1990, over 1 million Bangkok residents received treatment for respiratory infections associated directly with air pollution. Particulate matter constitutes a serious threat to public health and could lead to 1,400 deaths per year. And Bangkok's lung cancer rate is reportedly 3 times higher than elsewhere in Thailand. Because of the problems resulting from lead in gasoline, leaded gasoline is now banned in the U.S., I guess would be a good word. I know when I was young you had a choice of buying leaded or unleaded gasoline. Now it's, do you get ethanol or not? It's not leaded or unleaded. If a study of traffic exposed policemen versus non-traffic exposed policemen of the same age found that there were more incidents of respiratory health problems to the ones that were exposed to traffic. Mentioned earlier, we discussed Bhopal, India. In 1984, a Union Carbide plant in India, which manufactures a pesticide, exploded. This resulted in 50,000 pounds of a poisonous gas rolling downwind into a slum, with 4,000 people estimated to have died that night, and total deaths are nearly 15,000 and rising. Mid-Atlantic states are in a code red situation. So there is a sea viewing wide field of view sensor which imaged on June 28, 2001, showing a large cloud of aerosols over the eastern U.S., including Virginia, Maryland, and Pennsylvania. And it was unclear what it was, but it could be a mixture of pollution, smoke, and cirrus clouds. You've probably seen it, more particularly in the summer, but there is an air quality forecast, so let's go through what that is. The yellow level is moderate. You're supposed to limit vehicle use and set your thermostats to 78 degrees or higher. That way you're reducing helping to reduce the air pollution out there. The orange group is for unhealthy, for sensitive groups. Sensitive groups are children or anybody with a respiratory or heart ailment, in which case those groups should limit prolonged outdoor activities. And if possible, all people should avoid driving, refueling, and should try to reduce aerosols emitted in order, again, to try to improve the air quality. The red level is considered unhealthy for everyone. As a result, it should be everything below, plus healthy individuals should limit strenuous, prolonged outdoor activity. And again, avoid mowing lawns and painting, because as we saw earlier, lawnmowers are a big cause of atmospheric pollution, right? And we're trying to reduce the level of pollution by cutting off the activities that cause it. The last level is the purple level, which is very unhealthy. And it's everything below, plus avoiding all outdoor physical activities. Public transportation systems have linked their programs to the air quality forecast. So when you have a code red or a purple day, the bus system would have a ride the bus for free. That way there's fewer cars on the streets, and therefore you're again reducing the amount of pollution getting into the atmosphere. Pollutants don't affect just humans, of course. They also affect plants. There can be necrotic implications, in which case you kill the plant cells. There can be chlorotic, which destroys the chlorophyll cells particularly, which reduces photosynthesis, which results in the death of the plant. It also increases the susceptibility of the plant to diseases and pests. Ozone is the most serious pollutant for plants. So if we look at the percentage of crop yield as a function of the average ozone per season, we see that the lower the ozone, the higher the yield. For all, rice is less affected than soybeans, but all plants are affected by increased ozone. There's also a pH scale, which is a measurement of the hydrogen ions in a solution. Acid precipitation occurs when you have a pH of less than 5.5. Right? So neutral on the pH scale is 7. 5.5 is considered slightly acidic. 8.5, for example, is slightly basic, which is, of course, the opposite of being acidic. Here is a schematic of how we get acid rain. You have something, in this case it's shown to be like a power plant, or possibly cars, that emit sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxides into the atmosphere. There's some chemistry that happens, and those are converted into sulfuric and nitric acid. They can either dry fall out, which results in things like acid dew or water condensation on the plant, which damages the plant leaves. Or you can have acid rain and acid snow. That, of course, leaches into the ground and comes and enters the water supply, which kills off aquatic life. I believe this is Mexico City again, but please don't quote me on that one. This is a forest that has had serious damage due to acid precipitation. So where was acid rain deposition the worst? Right. So the lower the pH value, as we saw a couple slides ago, the more acidic the rain. So the west through a portion of the Midwest was not that bad. But But then as we moved eastward, it got worse and worse. Remember, the prevailing winds come from west to east across the United States. So the source of the acid rain was in the west and was precipitated out in the east. This schematic here shows the location of the 50 largest uncontrolled sulfur dioxide emitters. All emitters are utilities, and those are also in the east, so the east is contributing to the problem in the east, but so are the western states. Additional effects of acid deposition. It can affect reproduction of both plants and animals. It can cause leaching of other toxic elements. So, for example, it can pull aluminum out of the ground. It can lead to loss of life in aquatic ecosystems. Things that serve as buffers for acid deposition. Lime takes in the hydrogen radicals, combines it with calcium. That can then become mixed with water, so you get water out, carbon dioxide out, and a soluble form of calcium. Steps that have been taken to bring air pollution under control. There's the Clean Air Act, which identifies the most widespread pollutions. There's also the National Ambient Air Quality Standards, which sets the levels for protecting environmental and human health. Can auto manufacturers reduce emissions? Yes. That's not a surprise. We've actually seen this, I think, already. If you look at the car emissions as a function of time in 1965, they were higher than they are today. Right. And the vertical axis you look at depends on which compound. So if you want carbon monoxide, that is on the right-hand axis. If you want everything else, so your NOxes and your HCs, those are over on the left-hand side. And notice that the emissions have decreased as the number of registered vehicles in the U.S. has increased. So quite a bit is happening. There is a Clean Air Act from 1990 which puts in regulations. It tried to reduce sulfur oxide emissions to 50% below the 1980 level. It improved methods of reducing those emissions, allowed emissions allowances in trading and emissions purchases. It also tried to reduce your nitrogen oxide emissions, your NO emissions.